Number 1, what you don't need is too much spare clothing. No matter how long your trips are, you usually don't need more than one set of spare clothing. One underwear, one pair of spare socks, and one extra shirt. Items like an extra jacket or extra pants are not necessary. As soon as you change one item, you can wash it right away, ensuring you always have one clean piece of spare clothing. For sleeping, simply use the clean shirt. If you plan your laundry day on a reasonably sunny day, you will always have a set of clean clothes, because the washed items will most likely be dry by evening. Clothes with a higher synthetic content are particularly advantageous because they dry faster. Of course, everyone can bring as many shirts and sets of underwear as they want, but usually one spare set is all you really need. Number 2, you don't necessarily need a backpack with a frame. If you prefer a more stable carrying system, there's nothing wrong with that. But especially if your gear is lighter or you're mostly hiking in summer where you're naturally carrying less, you don't really need a padded and framed carrying system. If you pack your backpack well, even frameless backpacks work just fine. You can save yourself the carrying system and with it quite a bit of weight. Number 3, what you don't need is an overly large first aid kit. For hiking, all you need is a small high-quality first aid kit tailored to your specific needs for emergencies. For example, most hiking injuries are caused by falls. These primarily affect the lower extremities, including bruises, scrapes, fractures and sprains around the ankles and knees. Although less common, serious falls can also result in head injuries. Additionally, there are heart-related emergencies such as heart attacks and exhaustion. Realistically, as a layperson, you won't be able to do much with your first aid kit in case of a broken leg, a concussion or a heart attack. Deep cuts are theoretically possible, but statistically speaking, they are very rare when hiking. If you're doing bushcraft where you use knives and axes, the risk, of course, is much higher. If you experience a more serious injury during a hiking trip, you will likely need outside help anyway. What's most important is having a way to call for assistance. For most of us, survival won't look like this, it will look more like this. I'm not saying you shouldn't bring a first aid kit, you absolutely should, but I recommend taking a bit of time to customize your kit to suit your specific needs. This is my current first aid and repair kit. It's sufficient for me as a hiker, but of course yours could look different, perhaps a bit more extensive or even a little smaller. It's also a good idea to check your kit once a year and replace certain items if necessary. For example, one item I use frequently is tape. However, even the best tape loses its stickiness over time and should be replaced regularly. The same goes for duct tape, pills and bandages. They all have limited shelf life and need periodic checks to ensure they're still effective. Number 4, tick card. I've had many ticks over the past years, and for me these tick cards haven't really worked for removing them. Instead, I use the tweezers from my small Swiss Army knife. Compared to many other tweezers, these are slightly thinner, which allows me to remove even small ticks without crushing them. To keep ticks off your skin in the first place, use this no-bite spray on your clothing. It works really well. Number 5, you don't need a large and heavy knife. If you're into bushcraft or survival, then a knife is essential, but for hiking and trekking, you don't need a massive knife for splitting wood. A small, lightweight knife is more than enough. Number 6, a pump for your sleeping pad. When these little pumps first came out, I resisted buying one for a long time. Eventually I gave in and bought one, and honestly I'm surprised at how often I actually bring it along. While it's a nice gadget, it's still something you don't really need. Number 7, what you don't need are clothesline, detergent, soap or a wash bag. It depends a little on how you're traveling, but you can often skip most of these items. A separate line to hang your wet clothes isn't necessary. If you really need one, you can temporarily use a guy line from your tent, or simply hang the clothes over a rock or a tree. Special detergent for clothes isn't needed either. Regular soap works just fine. Depending on your trip, you probably won't need to bring any soap at all. if you're out in nature, you shouldn't use soap or detergent at all. If you're planning to stay occasionally in accommodations or campsite, you can wash everything there and don't need to bring soap with you. On longer and more remote hikes, however, it's important to wash your hands occasionally to maintain a good hygiene. In this case, a small piece of natural soap is more than enough. You can definitely skip items like these travel wash bags. For longer trips, however, a small bottle of hand sanitizer is a great way to keep your hands as germ-free as possible. Number 8, a rain cover for your backpack. The issue with rain covers is that they don't protect the back panel. In heavy rain, water can eventually seep in and soak your gear. A better alternative is to use a pack liner. Placed inside your pack, it provides full protection from all sides, keeping your contents dry. You can use specially designed liners, but a thick garbage bag or a heavy-duty bag from the hardware store work just as good. A waterproof bivy bag could also be an option, especially if you're already carrying one as a backup. The liner setup works best for backpacks whose exterior materials don't absorb much water. If your backpack has a lid pocket, everything inside this pocket will of course get wet in rain. To avoid this, either remove everything from the pocket or store it separately in something waterproof. It depends on the type of backpack you have and on the weather conditions you expect. For short day hikes, a traditional rain cover is usually sufficient. But for longer trips, a liner is the better choice because, as I mentioned, it keeps the whole inside of the backpack dry. Number 9, you don't need a full sit pad. I'm a big fan of these seat pads, but do you really need the full size? Me personally, I've cut mine in half and still find it perfectly comfortable to sit on. For me, it's less about saving weight, it's more about reducing pack size. A half-sized sit pad fits much better into my mesh pocket. That said, you might also want to ask yourself if you even need a sit pad. In midsummer or warmer climates, you probably can skip it, but I personally bring mine almost every time. Probably because the smaller version takes up almost no space at all. I understand that cutting your seat pad in half might seem extreme for some of you, and I totally get that, but that's what works for me, and that's why I also wanted to share it. Number 10, avoid cable clutter. If all your electronics use the same type of connector, you only need one type of cable. No one needs USB or micro USB. Ideally, everything should run on USB-C. If that's not the case yet for you, consider using one of these small adapters. They are lightweight and can help to reduce the clutter. Number 11, stuff bags. I usually carry 2 of those storage bags with me because they help me organize my gear. In my opinion, more than 2 or 3 of those bags aren't necessary and you don't need to pack every single item separately. A dedicated waterproof bag for your sleeping bag, in addition to the liner, can be helpful, especially during longer rainy periods as a backup security against water. Number 12, specialized outdoor water bottles. I use regular water bottles which you can buy in any supermarket. I reuse them for a few trips and then replace them. The simple reason is these bottles are lighter than most other options, and in my opinion you don't need to buy dedicated outdoor water bottles. Number 13, expensive ultralight gear. Don't get me wrong, I use a lot of ultra gear myself, but if you're just starting to build your setup, I'd recommend against buying the lightest and often most expensive gear right away. I would still recommend focusing on a relatively lightweight gear. However, keep in mind that the absolute lightest ultralight gear is often very expensive and not always necessary. In the beginning, it's better to save weight by being very mindful of what you pack, and you can save a lot of weight simply by leaving all unnecessary items behind. I hope you found this helpful. Check out these videos for more information. Take care, and I see you in the next one.